it's also about claiming a space, politically claiming a space, socially claiming a space. For example, recently, this was done in Ahmedabad. I can't remember the name of the dancer, Kathak dancer. Love jihad, nonsense. They had all this graffiti all over Ahmedabad, all the right-wing, whatever, so-called fringe elements who have nothing to do with the government apparently had done all this. And this dancer, Kathak dancer, in front of that, in this bosti, and she did several of these across Ahmedabad, she performed nothing. Pyar kiya to darna kya from Mughal Azam, oi ganta chaliye ota samne ole nachche. It's a political statement. It's a claiming of space. She's performing Kathak, pure Kathak, to a song which in the film says it is Kathak. So in terms of form, she's not doing anything because she has chosen to perform in that vilified space. She's making a political statement. That's what I mean about taking risk as well. She's doing this in Ahmedabad as a woman classical dancer alone in Ahmedabad with just a tape recorder playing that song. It takes guts. Quite right. It takes guts to do that. So all these relationships come in when you're talking about space. What I find strange is that whether you're a classical dancer, whatever dancer you may be, any dance, you're dealing with movement. Movement is only possible if you acknowledge space. If you do not acknowledge space, movement is not possible. Even stillness is not possible because you can only notice stillness if you notice the space around. But I think now, especially when you're talking about proscenium, what has happened when classical dance has moved from, say, the temples or the courts into the proscenium? If you look at Mughal Azam, if you look at that piece, how is it shot? It's shot from all around. So you have this, it's a fabulous sequence. When you were crores, there must, no, not crores, whatever, lakhs at that time, they also spent on shooting that one sequence. But it gives you an idea of in the court what the dancer would have had to do so that she's paying the main attention to Akbar, yes. But she's also taking in everybody else who's seated at least from three sides. Once you put it in the proscenium, your dancers become completely frontal. I can't even look, when you can't turn your back. It's a huge, that's part of the reason why Preeti, first 15 minutes of my solo is just the back. Because it's not what a classical dancer would ever do. Kintu 15 minutes to open without acknowledging the audience, to stand there upstage and do only work with the back is unheard of in the classical dance world. So all these things, assumptions about space, assumptions about where you are directing the dance, is vital to start again critiquing it. You may choose to do proscenium, that's fine, but be aware that that is what you are doing. Be aware that if I am going to proscenium, these are the strictures within which I must perform. If I don't want to do that, I will make a statement and not do it. Coming back to this whole idea of using alternative space, there are 2 or 3 reasons to do it. The main reason for dancers today to use alternative space is the fact, very simply, that you cannot afford any of the prosceniums. You can't afford it. I mean, if I want to book a Kalabandar or Bidla Sabha, 4 ঘন্টার জন্য আমাকে 40,000 টাকা দিতে হবে, কে দেবে আমাকে সেই টাকাটা? প্লাস আমাকে লাইট সাউন্ড সবই নিয়ে আসতে হবে। কোথা থেকে পাবো? গভর্নমেন্ট দিচ্ছে, ওই আমি তো শুনিনি। তো উল্টো তো গভর্নমেন্ট স্যালারি গ্রান্ট কেটে দিয়েছে। তো কোথা থেকে আসবে? You can't price tickets that are going to cover that cost. You can't do anything. তার উপর আবার GST. So one of the major reasons is you can't afford it. The venues are not available. We don't have enough venues that are actually interested in dance. And one of the reasons for me setting up the Pickle Factory is that there is no venue in the entire country that is looking at dance. In a country like India, where text came much later, it's movement forms, musical forms that have led the way in performance. So, in a country like that, there is no venue dedicated to looking at the moving body. I found very ridiculous, and many dancers find it ridiculous. So that is my Pickle Factory thinking, setting up a venue, a permanent venue name, and we could have done the festival in a Birla Sahagar. They would have partnered with us, no problem. If we had sold them the idea, we should partner with them. But it is also a statement saying, look, we don't need places like this. We will go as artists, we will find ways to create magical art in spaces that are not so pristine. And also, I think the time has come to stop looking at whether it's dance, whether it's whatever art, to stop looking at it as pristine, because the world is not pristine anymore. The resources for us, whether in availability of space or finances or time, jai hok, such a crunch, I think the best response is to tell all these halls, if half the dance population in Kolkata tells a hall like Birla Sabhagan, and tell ki, they just won't book it. If they say, আমরা এক বছর এই hall book করবো না, what is going to happen to that hall? What stronger statement can you make? The hall is there for us, we are not there for you. Confidence of that as an artist, if I boycott something, it is going to make a huge difference. But not if I boycott, আমি ঠিক আছে আমি গ্লাসাবাদের কাজ করলাম না, চলে গেল রণ। 3 million other groups are there to book it. But it's a Gandhian ideal in a sense, that it's a mass. If we all boycott it, then what is that hall going to do? Khabiki. So these are huge political statements and I don't expect it to happen, but I think this has to be part of the thinking of also for classical dancers or any dancers to say that we matter.
Dancers are intervening some unusual spaces, the spaces which were not allotted for the dancers. And that's a very serious politics happening. That has been happening in theatre, and we know it's performance art, and there's another visual art, essentially visual art movement. So should we call it as a movement? Like, space intervening?
It's too early to call it a movement yet. Into background আমি দিয়ে দিই। Pickle Factory season 1 টা তো শুরু হয়ে গেছে. So the first component of the season, we have invited this choreographer called Janice Claxton from Edinburgh. And Janice, I met her in New York last January. It was a sort of International Society for Performing Arts. There's a society based, organization based in New York. Every January they have a conference. Last year I was a fellow. And they have one session where they have a pitch new works program. So 10 artists are selected to come and pitch their works. They can be looking for touring or they can be looking for financial partners. So Janice was one of them, and she had pitched a work called Pop-Up Duets. Pop-Up Duets, the idea is very simple. She had worked with contemporary dancers, that is her training. Duets, 2 men, 2 women, different combinations of duets, heterosexual, same-sex duets. And it was literally created to come out of very ordinary situations in public spaces. So very different from a flash mob. It is not announced. You may be sitting in a cafe and there are 2 people sitting at the table next to you drinking tea, and suddenly they're talking to each other and that develops into a dance. You don't even notice it till it's halfway through, because you're not expecting dance in that case. But what is beautiful is that the moment you notice it, you do a double take. So, আমি কি ঠিক দেখছি? আমার কি দেখা উচিত? Oh, is this odd? আমার কি সরে যাওয়া উচিত? So, all this, which will never happen if you are a prescribed audience, because all those things are taken care of. Once that contract has been set up, whether you are sitting in an auditorium or whether in any other space, you know you are an audience. What happens when you do not know you are an audience? So that is where the intervention happens. So it can happen in the street, so the space is variable, but the intervention that I find interesting in Janice's work is that dance is insinuating itself into your mental space without you even recognizing it. So it's a very subversive act, and it's beautiful dance. So it's very difficult for people to ignore it. It's very difficult for people to ignore it. So I invited her to come and not bring the piece, but do the same kind of experiments with 6 dancers, 3 dancers from Ramon, 3 dancers from this company called Rhythm Music. Do those experiments, and she has a very specific training in duets, how to partner. That also you have to know, because to go out into the street and make this experiment takes a lot from the dancers, because you have, even when you're saying আচ্ছা আমি প্রসিডিংয়ে করবো না, আমি স্টুডিওতে করবো না, আমি রাজবাড়িতে করবো, আমি প্রাঙ্গণে করবো, ঠিক আছে, choosing your space and you're setting up parameters of that space. Here you can't set up parameters because you can't announce it. You will go there and start an improvisation and then see what happens. And so it's as risky for the dancers as it is for the audience, and that is what sets the edge in that, because you can see the dance in process and then suddenly you realize that I am part of this process because I am part of what is happening everywhere. But this sort of, when dance appears before you without being announced and is not being performed, it is just being done. Because it is these two people, as you saw, that they were having a conversation amongst the two of them. That conversation happened to be dance. তুমি দেখতে চাও দেখো, না দেখতে চাও move on, go buy your match or go catch your metro, whatever it is you're doing. They are not asking for attention, which is another political statement from dancers, because dancers are used to asking for attention. These dancers are not. They saying আমরা নাচবো, তুমি যা করবে করো. So then it becomes almost like eavesdropping into another conversation, and we all like to eavesdrop. That is there. Everyone wants to know, especially in Kolkata. So it is to ask him. So especially এই যে একটু এগিয়ে গিয়ে যে বস্তিটা আছে, they did some experiments there. আর ওখানে তো it was আমি ছিলাম না গতকাল, but Janice was saying that ওখানে গিয়ে প্রথম কথা বস্তির মধ্যে ওইটুকু জায়গার মধ্যে সবাই বেরিয়ে এসছে বাড়ি থেকে, এই দেখ কি হচ্ছে এখানে সব। ওখানে তো কলকাতার বস্তি, everybody is calling everybody else. হঠাৎ one woman comes saying এমা শেষ হয়ে গেল, আবার করো, এখানে এসে করো. So that response also they're getting. So it's suddenly there's a connection that people who have never seen dance before are making to dance without any fanfare, without any resources. It's just those two bodies in everyday clothes having a conversation which happens to be movement. And that I found it's a very beautiful connection that you make between those dancers, between dance and space, between dance and people. So again, coming back to classical marga, please do your classical marga. আমি করছি না তাতে কি আছে, but unless it is able to shift something in the audience, apart from খুব সুন্দর, because that is not really a shift. If it is not able to shift something in the audience, you need to look at your art. It's not the audience's fault. You need to look at your art and say, why is it not shifting something? I need to shift my relationship with it. Only then will it shift something in the audience. In terms of dance and theatre, I think that I've always been interested. I would have done it anyway. But one of the reasons I think that I went into working with dance and theatre together is that অনেক আমি কাজ দেখেছি in Indian theatre. Indian theatre being a composite form traditionally, but the more sort of urban iterations of that, whether it's a Ratantiyam or Chetan Datar in Bombay when he was trying, what did he call it? What a name! He was working with Kathak and Bharatanatyam dancers and actors. তো ওই কাজের গুলোতে আমি দেখলাম যে the directors tend to use dance and movement as a form of decoration or illustration, which is very sad. Of course dance can illustrate, but then so can words. And they don't use music like that. They use music much more intelligently. They use music to add a layer. They use music to counterpoint. Dance can do all this. Otherwise, it cannot be an art. If it can do only illustration, please, it's not an art. So, I think that directors from theatre who are not trained in movement or working with actors who are not trained in movement need to have a choreographer there, not to come and choreograph a piece or a section, but need to have what is there in the West. You have movement directors for theatre pieces. Even if it's something as simple about walking from here to there, blocking. The number of actors I have met who don't know how to walk, it's shocking. They just don't know how to get from place A to place B without making a big mess. They will have to have 20,000 stories in their heads আর কি সব আরে দূর বাবা ওখানে ওই চেয়ারে বসে আছো ওঠো দুপা হেঁটে আবার বসো ব্যাস পারবে না there's a problem. So you need, I think একটু আগে তো I think you have having a discussion about the physical body in Kolkata theatre. I've spoken to several directors on and off in small conversations who would say that আমরা তো প্রচুর টেক্সট নিয়ে কাজ করি but really we have no awareness of the body. So therefore you need movement directors more than you need choreographers in urban theatre. In Calcutta, in Bombay, definitely. Because once you are told what to do, you can do it as an actor. This is a huge generalization. Of course, there are actors who are fabulous with their bodies, but generally speaking. So this is one end of it. And the second is when you're bringing in choreography and movement, you have to understand what is it that movement can do, that text cannot do, that music cannot do, that design cannot do. If you are bringing in movement without acknowledging these things or asking these questions, then why are you bringing in movement? For what? If it's doing something that somebody else can do or repeating something that the actor is already saying, তাহলে কি দরকার? You're only having an extra person on stage and spending more money that you don't have. কি প্রয়োজন? So this specificity of if I'm going to use movement, this is why I need it. That thinking I have not seen very much on the Indian stage. On the Indian urban stage, when I look at work, say, he's gone, if I look at Habib Tanveer's work, he knew his work was very text based, but when he used music, he would use it to do something that only music can do. When he used dance, he would use it to do something that only dance can do. So that sort of specificity in, আছে বলেই আমি ব্যবহার করব তাহলে তো first of all, in my own work also, Ronan's work, I have never called it dance theatre. I have always called it dance and theatre. And I have always said name, a dance and theatre exploration of whatever. Or a dance and theatre interpretation of whatever. But the word and is always there, that makes all the difference. কারণ ডান্স থিয়েটার টার্মটা এসছে ডান্স থিয়েটার থেকে আর সেটার হিস্ট্রি যখন হিস্ট্রি না জানলে বা ইউ কলিং ইট ডান্স থিয়েটার ইউ হ্যাভ টু নো দ্য হিস্ট্রি অফ আ টার্ম বিফোর ইউ অ্যাপ্লাই ইট দ্যাটস কমন সেন্স নাহলে তো আমি কালকে গিয়ে কাথকে ভরতনাট্যম বলবো পরশু দিন মণিপুরিকে গিয়ে কন্টেম্পোরারি ডান্স বলে দেবো যা ইচ্ছা করতে পারি ইউ হ্যাভ টু নো ওয়্যার দ্যাট টার্ম হ্যাজ কাম ফ্রম আর সেটা আই এম সিইং আ লট অফ ইন দ্য রিসেন্ট পাস্ট অ্যাকচুয়ালি লাস্ট 5-7 বছর কলকাতায় স্পেশালি ফ্রম ডান্সেস আই সি ডান্স থিয়েটার কি এটা Now, there's a difference between dance drama and dance theatre. Nritya natya সেটা রবীন্দ্রনাথ তৈরি করা. It's a very clear form. You know what it is. Nritya natya does not translate into dance theatre. Translates into dance drama. It's a different thing. তো সেটা যদি করো call it নৃত্য নাট্য, call it dance drama. Dance theatre এই দেশে নেই. It has not been invented in this country. If you are going to use that term, please do your research. So I have a great problem with these, but the production might be very good, but don't give it a name which it is not. Give it, if you can't find a name for it, don't give it a name. There's no need for you to label your work. Let other people do the labeling. It's much easier. Much easier. Then you don't, frankly, you don't need to take responsibility for any label.
But some works happening now in Kolkata, even in India, right? See, recently Jairaj did a work. It's a dance theatre. It's Patukritto.
But is it dance theatre? But see, with Jairaj, he at least knows where the term is coming from because he has said, I'm very influenced by Veena Bausch, I'm influenced by Sasha Bal. So that is a tradition that he's talking about. এখন সেটা কতটা ভালো হলো, কতটা খারাপ হলো, কতটা সেটার সঙ্গে গেল না গেল, that's a matter of critique. He at least knows where that term is coming from. I doubt very much whether the other, originally I said dancers, I think theatre people are slightly more educated than dancers, classical dancers. I doubt very much that the classical dancers who are working today know where that term is coming. ভাষা উড়ে বেড়াচ্ছে, তুলে নিয়ে লাগিয়ে দিলাম. So that is, it's about respect, it's about respecting yourself and respecting that thing that you are using. You can't just pluck things out of thin air and use it because it's the, season of the time. That's just not done. It's unethical in a way. Everything has a history and you need to acknowledge that history even if you're going against it. You have to acknowledge that history.